Hello, can you hear me? And welcome. Can I have the first slide, please? Thank you. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to speak to you today, and hello from a very grey and windy England, the southwest of England, so we're a long way from you. My talk today is about communicating sustainability in the built environment, which is the space that you all occupy, and how you can use that to enhance your brand and to talk to your customers. And if I could just have my first slide, please, next. So why am I asking you to listen to me, or why have I been invited? Well, I have two hats that I wear. One is I run a specialist communications agency in the UK. We specialise in working with companies who are selling services and products into the construction sector, into the built environment. And nearly everything that we do is relating to sustainability. So the things that my clients sell tend to be energy products or materials for use in construction or in industry. And the second reason is because 2 years ago I created with my colleagues a very special project called Work in the Mind, which is a website. It's a content-based website which is dedicated to explaining the connection between human health, mental and physical health, and buildings. And that's a very important topic, and I'm sure that many of you will be interested in that. Work in Mind talks to about somewhere between 50 and 70,000 people every year, and it's for architects, designers, end users. But it's important for this conversation today because the topic of healthy buildings is really kind of wrapped up with sustainability. So I've got my next slide, please. So it's all about sustainability today. So that's the sort of our kind of conversation. So firstly, this is my agenda really. I want to talk to you about why we're having this conversation and why it's important. I want to discuss the fact that sustainability is about much more than just planting trees or reducing carbon. It's a much bigger topic. I want to tell you how I think the best way is to kind of tell your story. And I want to kind of give you some examples of who I think does this really well. Next. So firstly, I just suppose I'd like to look at some statistics with you, some numbers, and look at a general kind of sense of the direction of travel. And by that I mean the way things are moving in a communications context, in the building sector, in the built environment. And I thought it'd be useful to just make you aware of some interesting points. Next. So just before that happens, this is a really very strong quote from Forbes.com, which many of you may read their content, that with every generation the quest for sustainability strengthens. I think this is extremely important and very powerful. And it's powerful because, next slide, because with every generation you see a real shift in how different groups of people from different age groups respond to shifts in behaviour, I guess. So Generation Z, I don't know if that translates well where you are, but this is people who are entering into the workforce from last year, so they're young people, but 62% of them say that they prefer to buy from sustainable brands. So they're coming up through the kind of purchasing route, and I think that's really important to be aware of. So I think, you know, it's very important to kind of be aware that you can't ignore Greta and her friends. By Greta we mean Greta Thunberg. You know, there is a real shift in this kind of demand for sustainable products and sustainable brands. Next. Obviously, as you know, you guys will all be very well aware of the numbers in terms of the organisations that are committing to net zero. This is obviously the World GBC numbers. These were this is kind of looking at their last sort of big press release in this area. So I don't need to kind of explain that to you, but it's very obvious to me that that the demand for sustainability in the built environment sector is going to go up and up and up and up, and there are so many reasons for that, and those three sort of areas and statistics prove it. Next. So I think we have to conclude that the way that people think about the built environment has changed, and we really do need to keep up, which is kind of why I want you guys to, I suppose, have a sort of a call to action from today's presentation. Can I have my next slide, please? So this is important, really. So if we're talking about communications in this sector, I think that there are 7 things to think about. Obviously, I don't need to tell you, I'm sure, that the built environment accounts for around 40% of the world's kind of carbon emissions, and that is absolutely, you know, that's the main driver. I think that kind of fits in with number 2, which is that there is a real huge shift in how businesses are thinking about sustainability. So the boardroom, the big guys and girls in companies are really driving change and demanding change and demanding better. Obviously, there are government policy aims, and those are all around the world. You know, we have our own here in the UK, and that's really driving an enormous amount of communications activity. I think there's a really conscious supply chain. You know, ever since well, it's before Greta and people like David Attenborough and big names that really drive the awareness of issues like plastics and you know, microplastics and you know, carbon. It's a very conscious supply chain, and it's now a very demanding supply chain. So you as suppliers into the market, or if you are involved in some way in the construction and building sector, you have to be very aware that people want more and they want better from you. I think point 5, investors are more selective. I'm not an expert on the investment market, but I do know from what I read in the UK financial press that a lot of big investment funds are divesting. They are taking money out of businesses that they do not believe to be sustainable, or that they believe to be too reliant on fossil fuels. Number 6 is a passion of mine, well-being, and particularly that connection between human mental health and physical health and the built environment. Well-being is now a big corporate priority. You know, some big companies have a chief well-being officer as a job title, and I think that's really interesting. And because of that, that means that the construction sector, built environment supply chain needs to do a much better job of explaining how it can support human health to improve, by making subtle changes perhaps to the materials that are used to make buildings, to furnish buildings, or to operate buildings. And number 7, I don't want to dwell too much on the terrible time that we are all having, but the pandemic, COVID-19 has rapidly accelerated interest in how we think about the built environment from a sustainability perspective. Buildings need to be energy efficient, yes, they need to be nice places to be, but they also need to be safe places too. So maybe there are things we can do from a sustainability perspective in buildings to make a building feel safer and indeed be safer. Next slide, please. So this is important, really. Sustainability is absolutely not just about carbon. It is about much more than that. And if I can have my next slide. When I'm working with clients here in the UK, and one in particular springs to mind who I shall tell you about later, it's interesting because you have to sort of think about sustainability from all 4 core areas, and we kind of try to divide things up into the areas of environment, so water and energy and waste and all the things you'd expect, plastics. Number 2 is people. How do you keep people safe? How do you invest in people? People are part of your sustainability strategy. This is not, as I say, just about carbon. Sustainability and corporate social responsibility is about much more. The third area is communities. How do your operations impact on the communities that you are operating in or near? Do you invest in schemes to support local communities or schools or young people who may be interested in your industry? So it's about things like that. And the fourth area, customer and suppliers, really it's looking at how do you work with your supply chain, your customers, your suppliers to make your products and services more sustainable. Are there things that you can do together to drive that sustainability? Can I have my next slide, please? So I think we must have a story to tell across all 4 of those pillars. And I think that is very important. It's no point in just focusing on one. And I realise that a lot of you will be interested in the environmental aspects, but I would urge you to think about the other 3 too. Next. So if it's across every pillar, we tell the story to every pillar, and then we must tell the story to every stakeholder, every kind of person, whether it's the public, whether it's our customers, our suppliers, maybe partners from universities and academia. So it's everybody, and I think that's something that is often forgotten in communications. It is not a case of simply talking to your customers about product. It's a much bigger thing than that. Next, please. So I thought this would be useful for you. So I think I'd like to suggest that there are sort of five useful things that those stakeholders, that people would want to know about your business from a communications perspective. So I think that the obvious, really big thing here is what is your purpose? What are you there for? What are you trying to do? And I think that's, if you haven't done that as a business, I would urge you to think about that. Why do you exist in the first place? And I have a good example of how that works later on. I think the next point, number 2, about supply chain is really important. I mean, I'm seeing with both of my jobs, both things that I do, a huge interest in how ethical and transparent the supply chain is in the built environment. If you are a major construction company and you build homes, for example, do you know how ethical the company is that makes the bricks or makes the concrete blocks? Do you know whether they have a strong supply chain too? So the third area is about clear goals and aims. Now, we work with some very small companies, and I work with some much bigger companies here in the UK. And I would say that the ones that are most successful from a sustainability perspective are those who have really clear goals and aims that about what they are trying to achieve or what they need to do. Now, that could be how much carbon they plan to save, what they plan to do on reducing plastics, or it could be things like how many young people do they intend to bring into the business and support on to help them with their kind of growing their skills, for example. Number 4 is about being transparent. I hope that word kind of translates well, because it is so important in this conversation. It is so important that you as a business show full transparency about who you are and who you deal with and your supply chain and how you operate. Because if you don't, somebody will find the thing that is not true, or the thing that you are trying to hide. I would urge you to really welcome the opportunity to be transparent. Number 5 is your commitment to sustainability just skin deep? Is it just thin? Really important. If I think particularly younger consumers, young people are very, very, very conscious of brands who tell the world that they are committed to sustainability, but they aren't. It is in England we call it greenwash. I have no idea what you call it where you in Colombia, but it's very, very important that you are truthful, and that's a kind of a good tip. On my next slide. So we've already kind of talked about the goals thing. I would urge you to really kind of set very clear goals, and I would urge you to keep communicating on how you're getting on. Big companies in the UK have to do reporting on these things. Smaller companies do not, but that does not mean to say that you shouldn't do it. I think people really want to know what progress you're making across all the areas that you're operating in. Next. I think this is important. Certainly, if you are operating in, let's say, if you are a company selling energy efficient technology into buildings, for example, and you're listening to this presentation, I think that you are contributing to solving some of the biggest challenges that we face as a planet. You are helping to bring down carbon emissions, aren't you? And I think this is all about purpose, actually. So we've talked about purpose already, but I would like you to remember from today just how important it is to believe that you are making a very valuable contribution to some seriously big sustainability objectives that we need to save our planet for future generations. Next. So this is just making it clear to you again that honesty and truth matters. You must really really be committed to this. I think people really value the truth. People, your consumers, the people buying your products, buying your services, and this is the same for domestic goods, and it's the same in business too. Just because we're talking about consumers here doesn't mean that this is not relevant to a business audience. It is 100% relevant to a business audience. Next. So I think there is a really compelling, really strong business case for all the things that I am saying here. And we are a little bit limited on time, but I would like to just point out a few of these points. If I can just have my next slide. If you are a business that values sustainability and that you commit to sustainability, it's very clear that helps to attract and retain talent in your business, because young people, I've already showed you some statistics, young people value that commitment. And some good research here that I sometimes use, that companies that have a high employee satisfaction rate outperform, they outperform them in terms of money, turnover, sales, every year. And I think that that's something that any chief executive should be mindful of, should be interested in. Next. This is a slightly different end of the benefits spectrum, but if you are somebody who is, let's say somebody listening today who has real estate, or maybe you are selling products and services into the real estate sector, if you sell, if you invest in, if you invest in real healthy building technology, good lighting, good ventilation, great air quality, great design for your offices, if you invest in these things, it helps to push up the rent value of your building, of your space. So there is a real commercial benefit to doing this. Next. So, it's very clear, and this is actually again from Forbes.com, but that over 90% of chief executive officers say that sustainability is fundamental for success. If you are somebody watching this today who wants to make a business case for investment in sustainability in your organization, you can use some of these statistics to say, what, it's the foundation of success. All the big companies think so. On my next slide, please. So what I thought I would do in the last slides that I have is to just talk about 3 real clients. They are all current clients of my content comms business. Very, very different businesses. One very large business, one much smaller business, and one very small business, but they all share certain characteristics. Can I have my next slide, please? So this is one of my most favourite clients ever. This is Britain's biggest brick manufacturer, clay bricks. They also make concrete products, Ibstock, very, very well-known brand here in the UK. And they're making, nearly a billion bricks a year. They are listed on the stock exchange. They're a FTSE 250 business. And we've been working with them for about 3 years. And when we first met them, nobody really, apart from maybe 1 or 2 people, were interested in sustainability. What's interesting now is that is very, very different indeed. We've completely turned that around. But one of the fundamental things that they did was I worked with them over the last 18 months to put together a sustainability roadmap to 2025 with clear goals and clear aims within that on everything from carbon and plastics and waste to apprenticeship schemes and community commitment and engagement. And that is a really, really strong backbone of the activity. The other thing I would say about Ibstock is that they have really strong social purpose, and that's led right from the top, from the chief executive. So they think that their purpose as a business is about better homes for everybody. The chief executive is a very good man. He has very strong principles, and he strongly believes that people deserve to have quality homes to live in, and as a brick manufacturer that they are contributing to that. All of their corporate strategy is aligned to the roadmap, which is important, and all of their comms activity and business activity is across the 4 core sustainability pillars. They are the same pillars I shared with you earlier. Everything that they do is about, in communication, is about talking about people. How do people make change and positive change? And I'm very pleased to tell you that even though many people would say, how can a brick manufacturer, a dirty industry with lots of energy being used to make bricks, I'm very pleased to tell you that the way that we've worked with them and the stories that we've managed to tell have resulted in Ibstock winning at least 16 award commendations for the work that they are doing in sustainability. And we are so proud of them, and they are a great bunch of people. Could I have my next slide, please? This is a smaller business. This is Priva, who are a Dutch-based business, but they operate in many countries throughout the world. They make horticultural and building automation controls, but they are a business with a very clear social purpose, which is led by their chief executive. They are passionate about sustainability, and they absolutely understand that buildings that people work in and live in need to be better spaces if we are to improve human health, physical and mental health. And they have an entire product strategy and innovation strategy that focuses on how to achieve that. And they produce, we work with them on a lot of this, but to produce a lot of content to educate the market on how they are doing that and what benefit there is. But really, Priva is a splendid company, and I would urge you to look them up. Finally, next slide. Finally, this is a much smaller business. This is what in England we would call a micro business. But this is a local business to us here in the southwest of England, very, very nice young company who make furniture. They make timber furniture. It is handcrafted, it's highly sustainable. They are absolutely committed to changing the way that furniture in the commercial and domestic sector is specified, and they educate their end users, the end customers, to demand a better quality product, better timber, certified timber that has proof of supply chain. They encourage the specifiers, architects and designers, to ask more questions so that their specification is better. There is no greenwash, totally committed to sustainability. They are very, very aware of how to educate their customers and specifiers on well-being, human health, and how timber as a material has an impact on that. And also they are very strong at championing British skills and craft and materials. Next slide, please. So finally from me, one more slide of things just to say to you. I would urge you to think about these things when I stop talking. The first is I really, from a communications perspective, encourage I want you to encourage your customers and your stakeholders to ask more questions of the things that they are buying. You know, if you're selling bricks, make your customer ask you how you made those bricks, how much energy is in those bricks. If you're selling technology, make somebody ask you, you know, about how you have made your product or your service. I would urge you to get more information and education out to your market, and I would really urge you to try and educate your specifiers better, and really kind of reflect that kind of customer demand. And most of all, you know, don't do nothing, do something. So I hope that that's the end of my presentation, but I really hope that was of interest, and you know, please send any questions to the GBC team. So my contacts on the next slide, on just the final slide. Thank you. So that's everything from me, and I think yeah, I think I'm done. But I hope that was useful.